This lazy man's name is Hao Xian. He had a dream of becoming a scum who would spend his whole life just lying around waiting to die. However, this dream was not destined to come true. In his misfortune, Hao Xian was miraculously transported to another world. It had been more than 3 years since he had entered the fantasy world of cultivators that everyone dreamed of traveling to. But not him. In this world, he could achieve a staggering success that could only be envied. And it was all thanks to the system that accompanied him in this world, as well as cheats, thanks to which the achievement was simplified thousands of times. The previous owner of the body had a secret shelf with such cheats. There were secret techniques available in this world. For example, one of them could grow small demonic wings. It was certainly something from the Western theme, but if you develop, then even small wings could be used. But all of this was nothing compared to being depressed. Cultivation was too tedious for Hao Xian. Doing it was something he didn't want to do at all. It wasn't worth delaying it either. He had to think of something immediately. If he missed his second chance, the heavens would punish him for sure. The heavenly god had put so much work into him to give him such opportunities, and Hao Xian was so careless about it. There were so many people who wished to have such a chance and be in his shoes. It couldn't go on like this. First, I had to do at least 10 push-ups to get up to speed, and then we would see. The fact that Hao Xian had dared to do this was already a feat for him. But his suppression continued to overcome him. Soon, he didn't care about the god's possible punishment. Let the god punish him, because Hao Xian had done everything he could do. It was safe to bid farewell to the life of an immortal cultivator. In his thoughts, Hao Xian did so and said goodbye, promising that he would miss this life and hope that at least in heaven he could overpower his laziness. Originally, Hao Xian had thought that he would be as much of a loser in this life as he was in the last. Watching the clouds was so enjoyable, it was something he would do all his life. However, at that time he had not yet realized that he had another disadvantage besides laziness. There were 100 days left to complete the quest. If he failed it, it would result in the death of the host. His second disadvantage, or maybe even a plus, was that he was so damn afraid of death. The time limit was like a thunderclap to him. The fucking system had never even mentioned that there was a time limit. The thought of risking death in 100 days gave him a kick in the ass. His motivation immediately kicked in. With all his might, he tried to avoid a pitiable doom and tried to do something. Thoughts of death compelled him to traverse mountains and seas, and relieved him of his laziness. The instinct of self-preservation worked perfectly. In the shortest amount of time, he reached Yuntai Mountain, and decided to stay in an ordinary cave. After riding and running, his back was making itself felt, but it was nothing compared to his thoughts of doom. To complete the system's mission, he needs to activate the precious pearl. To think that for 3 whole months he'd been running around for some strange pebble. But most importantly, he had time, and was able to activate the pearl unhindered. The activation blinded his gaze. He didn't care at all why he was doing this task or what would happen afterwards. The main thing was that he would live and continue to look at the clouds. But the task didn't end at the activation of the pearl. The system was preparing its story about the Heavenly Palace. At the moment, the Heavenly Palace was ruled by the Jade Emperor. The era that began with his reign was called the Golden Era of the Heavenly Palace's history. There were 12 Supreme Masters serving the Jade Emperor. All of them were so strong that any one of them could overpower each of the Heavenly Palace Emperors of other eras. However, despite this, in the 1473rd year of the Jade Calendar, the Heavenly Palace was to fall. According to the story, all 12 masters were to die in a fierce battle. The cause of this catastrophe will be 9 mysterious individuals who suddenly appeared from somewhere in the west. And they will introduce themselves as Black Glitter. At this moment, it was the 773rd year of the Jade Calendar. The destruction of the Heavenly Palace would only happen in 700 years. Hao Xian's task was to help the 12 masters surpass themselves and become even stronger. Only then would they be able to defeat the Black Luster organization and save the world from destruction after 700 years. For Hao Xian passing the introductory task, he would be given an initial reward. The system gifted the young man with the card of the Great Sage. It was an expendable item that allowed one to briefly gain the power of one of the 12 masters who had reached the highest proficiency. The second introductory quest had been unlocked. Its goal, to reach Mount Huago and find the Ape King, who was now at the initial stage of cultivation. Once Hao Xian found him, then one would need to help the Monkey King gain 30% of his potential possible strength. There were no further clarifications, including clarifications about the timing, but this did not reassure Hao Xian in any way. He was angry that the system was giving him such hard entry quests. Why did he have to travel halfway around the world to watch this short video? Couldn't she have shown it to Hao Xian right away? What is this but bullying? He had to literally bum those all 3 months. Of course he was pissed. But even as the system crashed, it was coming back together again. The system gave him a little over 3 years for the first quest. But this one should take longer. However, now he could relax. He wasn't going to worry about a problem that didn't require an immediate solution. He could say goodbye to all his worries and hello to his vacation. But until a new notification from the system came up. The notification said that the time to complete the quest was only 3 days. At this moment, Hao Xian was ready to destroy anything he could get his hands on. He felt as if the system was trying to deliberately kill him. The fear of death settled back into his mind. In panic, he ran wherever his eyes saw him, as if in this way he could escape death. But 3 days had passed, and strength wasn't eternal either. Running and hiding from death wouldn't work for a lifetime. While he was running, he encountered cultivators on the way. They might not be aggressive, but Hao Xian started to ask them to let him go and not touch him to be on the safe side. However, his fears and concerns were understandable. Just the mere sight of these cultivators could give him a stroke. Such people certainly didn't look like they had good intentions, but so far they hadn't touched Hao Xian, the master of the Tianmen sect, one of the 3 proper great sects, Liuan. He managed to achieve the immortal infant stage from the late stage. He was at the head of 12 cultivators. Hao Xian had to explain in front of him what he was doing at the demonic beast mountains. Telling the truth would not be the best option, so he decided to lie, saying that he was gathering herbs and had wandered here by chance, with the assurance that he would now be released. He didn't find the Ape King, but he did come across some cultivators. It was not a good idea for mortals to wander into the habitat of demonic beasts. In order to avoid asking for more trouble, Hao Xian promised that he would leave this place right away. But Master had a better idea. Why don't the cultivators suck out all of Hao Xian's blood and turn it into a blood chi pill? Then they could attract a few more demonic beasts to its scent. Hao Xian's entire appearance said that this idea was not a good idea. But these masters are from a righteous sect. How could they even say such a thing? In addition, there is an unspoken rule for immortals that forbids them from touching ordinary mortals. But it seems that this was not any rule, but just a good joke. Hao Xian looked so cute and naive in their eyes. After all, the immortals really only had the law of the jungle. They weren't burdened with any other rules. It was getting worse by the hour, so would Hao Xian have to die today? But since he was in such a ridiculous situation, he was going to fight to the end, and this time he decided to threaten with his secret weapon. Only it was unlikely that the cultivators would believe him. So he would have to use the card, and something would be resolved with the Monkey King later. We hope so. The card activated quite quickly. Hao Xian didn't even expect such speed. A huge amount of power was continuously flowing into his body. He felt as if he was about to burst from this power. But it was just a feeling. The card worked in such a way that it wouldn't harm its owner, so he definitely wouldn't die from it. His transformation did not leave the cultivators indifferent. They had yet to realize what was happening to him and where his body had gotten so much chi energy from. Perhaps watching the clouds in the sky didn't bring him as much pleasure as feeling so strong. Hao Xian had also learned another wonderful feeling, that of strength and superiority. Now, he was ready to exterminate all of them, according to the law of the jungle, to show them where they belonged in the food chain. Hao Xian hoped to teach them a lesson, but his strength didn't even last for 2 minutes as everything dissipated in that second. He had not expected the short time to be so short. All his earlier words were now nothing more than empty words. The system hurriedly congratulated Hao Xian that the host had activated the Great Sage card for the first time. He would now be able to transform into a Monkey King, but the use would be available in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, would Hao Xian be able to use that power for as long as he wanted, or what? In any case, he could have activated the card beforehand and he wouldn't be on the verge of death right now, but he didn't know that. The system should have told him right away. Well, Hao Xian was now a dead man. This time, he would really die. But before that happened, the master was curious about what kind of chi was that. The master had already intended to strike this mortal, but someone called out to him, calling the overgrown grandfather. And behind that call came the deafening roar of a dragon, which, found closer, could render a man deaf. This grandpa was addressed by the king of the apes himself. Here you have met Sun Wukong, the king of the monkeys, or rather his young version. The very target of Hao Xian, who came to him on his own. Of course, the idea of some cultivators deciding to hunt his ape kin was not something the king liked very much. Master did not expect that in such a wilderness, here would appear demon-class king. To ignore the demon would simply be impossible, after all. Such demons did not come out of their holes just because of a couple of mortal demons of lower class. Didn't it mean that he was just having fun? But it was useless to call the sect elder since he wouldn't be able to get there in time anyway. Therefore, the master decided to take a stand against him himself, using all his power and all his skills. He also ordered the other cultivators to buy him some time, for he was about to complete 2 high-ranking spells. But what was he talking about? There was a demon king in front of them. Their low-rank spells wouldn't even reach him. The cultivators were certain of their deaths, and this girl didn't even have a boyfriend, so it seemed like that was what she cared about in the moment of possible death. Only the master didn't even want to listen to anything like that. He was certain that if these worthless cultivators won them a lot of time for him, even a demon king would die from his spell. Is this really going to happen? The demon king himself was willing to wait for such a thing. Sun Wukong admired the old man's confidence, so why not help him? Sun Wukong suggested that the master take his time. After all, such spells required long preparation. The king was willing to wait as long as it took, but that didn't make it any easier for anyone. Other than Hao Xian, he needed at least 8 more minutes before he could use the peak Monkey King form. Since the king was so confident in his powers, he would not resort to any tricks and accept the master's spell, or else he would lose face in front of his monkeys. 5 minutes later, something finally started to happen. And what good timing. Because our king had missed us. He was intrigued by what was happening, because there had never been a worthy opponent for him. Maybe this time Sun Wukong would be lucky enough to meet one? There was no doubt about it. Any cultivator would be frightened by such a hurricane. But how would the legendary Demon King react to it? The master was already anticipating his victory, and mocked Sun Wukong in every possible way, because he saw him as a stupid monkey. His stupidity was compared to typical villains from books. Now the master would show him the power of the divine treasure, which was given to him by the sect elder himself. Even cultivators who were in the same sect for a moment didn't expect to see a treasure from the heavenly palace. It was the first time they had seen a spell of such power at all, and now they were confident in the words of the master. Now the master was glad to say goodbye to the silly monkey, and hoped to see him in his next life. The only disadvantage of this spell was that it worked very slowly. Any other opponent would hardly wait. But Sun Wukong was confident in his strength, and that he could withstand such a blow. This spell created a tremendous amount of pressure that could be felt even by those standing a decent distance away. It was hard for the cultivators to resist, but the king had no problem holding on. The master sincerely wished the monkey dead, and trusted that his strength would prove stronger. Sun Wukong perceived his spell as if it was a puff of wind, but no more. When the spell reached its target, the master could find no place for his joy. He was sure that there weren't even any bones left of the monkey after something like that, and happily remembered his words that his spell would wipe out the same Demon King, and the monkey had died because of his self-confidence. But he did not rejoice long, and he began to rejoice before his time. The master had to face his enemy again and drown himself in his own words from such an embarrassment. Sun Wukong had become several times larger. Compared to the master, he was a giant, exceeding the cultivator by 10 times. In addition, he didn't have a scratch on him. Now the master will know what real power is. Sun Wukong's fist, like lightning, tearing the air with its undeniable power, rushing towards the master with incredible speed and ruthlessness. Cultivators had the honor of witnessing the king demolish an entire mountain with his fist before reaching the master. But for some reason, Sun Wukong was in no hurry to smear the master's face, as if he was savoring every moment of this battle in which he would obviously be the winner. In order not to feel this blow on himself, the master voluntarily admitted his defeat. Mr. Monkey was the strongest the master had ever seen. The master hoped that the king's generosity was commensurate with his incredible strength, and he would spare the life of a fool like the master. Sun Wukong started to shrink his body, but even after that, the master did not dare to get up from his knees. He still felt fear. The Demon King, as he headed towards the master, noticed something else, or to be more precise, someone who was already trembling with fear. Hao Xian was unable to control his emotions and screamed as if he had learned that he was now in adulthood. So he hurriedly explained to the king that he had nothing to do with these people at all. Why did he pay attention to him in the first place? Hao Xian didn't even have qi. He shouldn't have even noticed him. It just so happened that Hao Xian had caused him to not have the most pleasant feelings originally, and now he must pay for it. He still had 35 seconds left before he could turn into a monkey. He had to at least explain the situation to tighten the time. Hao Xian came here to pay his respects to the great Monkey King. Since he was 3 years old, Hao Xian had listened to the great deeds of the mighty Monkey King every day with hope. Every child in his village dreamed of visiting Mount Huago, worshipping Sun Wukong, and becoming his disciple. That must have sounded convincing. But our hero didn't stop there, because he was happy that today he had a chance to become an apprentice to the Monkey King. And if the king did not accept him, he would have no meaning in life. There were still 15 seconds left. Sun Wukong didn't expect that he was quite famous in the outside world. Let Hao Xian be struck by lightning if he said a single word of lies, but that lightning bolt will be the Demon King himself. It didn't matter much though, because there were still 3 seconds left. The main purpose of the conversation had been fulfilled, but it was impossible to stop the Demon King. He believed that humans were unworthy to be his disciples. It had finally happened. Hao Xian tried something to dodge his punches and finally disappeared. Sun Wukong thought that this guy was an ordinary mortal, but what he saw surprised him. Well, Sun Wukong deserved the title of one of the 12 great masters of the Heavenly Palace, Hao Xian thought, for the king possessed a truly frightening power that in foolish hands could wreak havoc. What the hell was this? Sun Wukong couldn't understand. He had a strange and very familiar feeling, as if this guy had turned into his kin, all in an instant. Hao Xian had waited for his moments after all, and now he was no longer an ordinary weak boy, but a Monkey King who, in terms of strength, would be able to resist another Monkey King. But Hao Xian didn't let his gaze linger for long and disappeared. Hao Xian is very vindictive, and no wonder the first thing he decided to do was to remind the old man that this creep wanted to suck all his blood for the sake of one pill. Did that old man say something about the law of the jungle? Now we can find out who the law of the jungle is loyal to. He was so weak that he couldn't even fight back. The Taoist had to apologize to avoid being killed. Events were gathering momentum. Stronger and stronger creatures were appearing. Of course, this couldn't help but intrigue Sun Wukong. He was looking forward to the real battle. Why would that monkey waste his time on a regular old weakling? He'd better let him fight him, the Monkey King. A battle seemed to be brewing. Hao Xian himself didn't mind kicking this arrogant ape's ass. But someone interjected into their conversation, and that person clearly didn't like what was going on. A certain silhouette appeared out of nowhere, just out of the sky. It was creating a huge ball of lightning around itself and covering the sun. The old Taoist recognized this silhouette as the real immortal himself. Without even waiting for the immortal to descend, the old man began to beg to be rescued. Right here, a master who had achieved immortality was descending from the heavenly palace. The old man was sure that now these demons would be dead and he would be saved. Before the sinful demons appeared one of the immortal masters of the heavenly palace. But only immortal did not understand why these monkeys, and not yet on their knees. For the sake of decency, the Monkey King decided to at least squat down. But he wasn't going to believe in this heavenly palace. And even if he did, Sun Wukong would take a moment to turn things upside down there. However, he didn't like to socialize for too long either. So he decided to use the Golden Light Chain spell, so that no spell can be cast on him, and there's no need to bore the Monkey King with his presence. Is that the only thing that ignorant, stuck-up monkey can do? How dare this monkey think that such a spell could hold back a true immortal? It was funny, but up to a certain point in time, until this true immortal realized that he was actually shackled in chains. Laughter and confusion were followed by furious irritation. He wanted to convince himself and others that he could break those chains easily, but he couldn't do it. Whatever he tried to do, the chains sucked all his strength away, making it impossible for him to escape with ordinary physical strength. He had only spent a few years in seclusion, and when the earth demons had time to become so powerful, the immortal had not caught it. But that wasn't that important anymore, compared to the fact that he was being targeted by a hungry dragon mouth that could swallow him like a gnat. This immortal was just flying by and wanted to show off a bit to himself. But immortal Taoists should be careful what they wish for. You never know what they'll turn out to be. The old man hesitated. After all, an immortal master from the heavenly palace couldn't just die like that? That would be too stupid, wouldn't it? Could he somehow be revived and the old man be saved after all? But not likely. The old man's hope died with this immortal, and the dragon began to digest its food. Thanks to this immortal, the dragon was able to break through to the next stage. An immortal master had come such a long way only to hand over all of his accumulated chi to some demon at the end. This was the most frustrating thing that could happen today. Except this old man is probably going to die today too. The dragon had advanced to a new stage, and as a result, it was so huge that in proportion to the entire Huago mountain, it was equal to it. Now he was not just a dragon, but a 12-winged dragon king. In his current state, he's much stronger than his master. What master? Ugh, that stupid, stinking monkey. Now then, Sun Wukong was no match for this majestic dragon. But what loomed over him made the dragon come to his senses. That hammer-like contraption hovered briefly over the dragon and fell right on top of him. Just like that, the first 12-winged dragon king in the history of this world died. He was only 765 years old, very young, and died in the prime of his life. There was exactly nothing left of him, not even a wake could be made. Sun Wukong was already envisioning a possible threat to him and the other monkeys, for Mount Huago had been destroyed along with the dragon. Where would the demons sleep now? Hao Xian felt terribly awkward because this was the first time he used the golden hoop staff. It was very difficult for him to control its size. And if such a stick were to be dragged across the Dragon King, he'd drop his skates too. But true masters don't just rely on their weapons. Hao Xian was a nobody without his staff. So did Sun Wukong suggest fighting without weapons, or was he just scared? But Hao Xian was not timid and immediately agreed, even asking the king to choose what they would compete in. No matter what the king chose, Hao Xian would still be better than him at everything. Sun Wukong didn't even want to listen to this, for he saw that it was the monkey who slew the dragon only because of his staff, and he, the Monkey King, would make it in speed, even though it was his weakest side. What a cunning little monkey! Hao Xian was him from the future. Of course he knew what Sun Wukong was good at, and Sun Wukong's speed wasn't the weakest. At the other end of the continent was the island of the immortal Penlai. There grew the lotus, the beginning of all beginnings. Whoever plucks the lotus leaf first wins. Without any countdown, Sun Wukong chased away to emerge victorious in this fight. But to get to the island faster, he decided to use Jindu, his magic cloud. Thanks to him, it'll be very difficult to overtake the Monkey King. Immortals hadn't seen such speed at all. It was comparable to the speed of light. The island of Penlai was millions of leagues away. It would take months to make such a journey. Incidentally, the second monkey had also disappeared, unwilling to give his victory to his opponent. And here it is, the immortal island of Penlai. It was not for ordinary people. Because it was made up of many small islands, people would simply not be able to move around the island. The cloud was fast, but it also had its disadvantages, namely that it couldn't land properly. Sun Wukong had to bury his face while landing, and even when the king scolded the clouds, he didn't care at all. Sun Wukong was 100% sure that this cloud had done him such a disservice. But there was no point in getting upset. The Monkey King made it to the lotus in time, and for that horror you could thank the cloud. All 28 lotus leaves were in place. It seemed as if the great Ape King had once again won another victory. 10 minutes later, on Huago Mountain, Hao Xian had already met the king. That one was clearly late. Hao Xian was already thinking that he would have to wait until tomorrow. But he couldn't be conceited, because the king just had to deal with something on the way back. In fact, it was quite painful to fly into the ground at such a speed, and he didn't want to repeat the experience, so he decided to go back on his own. The fact that Hao Xian had returned earlier meant absolutely nothing, because he didn't have the lotus leaf with him, which meant that he had lost. But how is it certain that he doesn't have a lotus leaf? Sun Wukong was sure of this because he had brought the beginning of all beginnings lotus with him, and it had 28 leaves on it, which meant that he had reached it before Hao Xian. The immortals couldn't believe their eyes, for in front of them was the legendary lotus of the beginning of all beginnings from the island of immortals. And all this in just 20 minutes. That's the real Monkey King, a great deity. But for him it's just a little run, nothing more. There was no limit to Sun Wukong's boast, but Hao Xian chose to ignore it. In fact, he did not really get the lotus leaves, which Sun Wukong had no doubts about, because here the first one got to them, and now demanded to recognize the defeat of Hao Xian. But that wasn't the case at all. There was another reason. Hao Xian didn't expect his body to be so fast. When he ran, he caught the eye of the heavenly gods and goddesses because of his speed. So, to reassure himself, he decided to stop and come back here. But Hao Xian's words were more like a foolish boast. To think that the heavenly gods and goddesses have caught my eye? That's crazy. Did Hao Xian also scare the Jade Emperor to death?
Enough of this nonsense. Sun Wukong demanded Hao Xian's defeat. The Monkey King had defeated that blabbermouth in a fair fight.
It looked like in order to prove his superiority, Hao Xian would have to do it again one more time, although it was very dangerous. Let everyone watch carefully or they'll say it was all made up again. Hao Xian chased at breakneck speed. This speed was not comparable to Sun Wukong's speed, even close. He decided to run to the same place, Penglai Island. And while he was running, something was already happening in the sky. Many gazes from the sky opened up, observing the mere immortals. The more closely they gazed, the more it frightened everyone present, and including the unrivaled Monkey King. Before anyone could even realize what was happening, Hao Xian had already returned. Maybe he shouldn't have run at full speed. Although Hao Xian knew what he was getting into, he was also very frightened. Fortunately, he was not in his own form, but he should be more careful next time, as he had gotten himself into too dangerous an adventure. Never before, not even since Sun Wukong was born out of stone, had he ever experienced feelings like this. That feeling. It scared the hell out of me and was even incomparable to animal fear. Sun Wukong had never experienced a state of hopelessness before, and yet Hao Xian had helped him gain 5% of his potential strength. At this moment, he only possessed 15% of his entire potential. Although he thought that he had lost, even so, he couldn't accept his loss. He was sure that Hao Xian's victory had something to do with his beautiful armor and weapons, so he didn't recognize his victory. The only thing is that Hao Xian has decided to lend Sun Wukong his equipment. Then Hao Xian will have nothing to cover his defeat, because the Monkey King will show him that Hao Xian is nothing without his toys. But he decided to temper his fervor, for a realization had come to him. Sun Wukong decided to fight him another time, but right now he had some things to do. He also called his monkeys after him. But now was just a great chance. Because without this armor, Hao Xianyu simply couldn't compare to a king. That creep had destroyed the House of the Monkeys, the Huago Mountain. Now the king was obligated to avenge him for that. After all, this was the land of their ancestors. There was nowhere to go after that. The monkeys had talked him into it, and he was ready to change into Hao Xian's armor. But Hao Xian felt that something was going wrong. It's important to be alert. Either the king was embarrassed or there was something else behind it. But either way, he decided to hide while changing clothes. He needed to change very quickly. If he was exposed, it would be the end. That's basically the end of it. He's been exposed, and so has the guy he was trying to hide from. Hao Xian laughed and couldn't restrain his laughter, and Sun Wukong stood in a daze, for he had been caught. In fact, Hao Xian wasn't going to tell the whole world what he had seen. But nevertheless, the Monkey King was very angry and couldn't restrain his anger, so gave himself and others present away. None of them expected to see such a nice tattoo on his arm. It was something intimate to him, and at the same time, Sun Wukong was embarrassed to show it to anyone, lest they laugh. Just think of it. The Demon King got a tattoo like that. He looked so formidable, but instead he drew ducklings, hearts, stars, and candy. But then again, what's there to laugh about? Couldn't a Demon King have cute tattoos or something? Sun Wukong was ready to kill them all for laughing, but everyone was just surprised. Only Hao Xian found it extremely funny. And you have to ask, why is that? What kind of stereotypes? Whoever said that strong and handsome men can't like something cute? The Demon King should be the one to change this world. And society should realize that this is perfectly normal. Finally, after all this display of cuteness, the Demon King changed into a different armor. But he couldn't forget that now everyone could see his top secret. No matter how hard he tried to forget it and focus on the enemy, the thought of the past wouldn't let him go. When he felt the full, real strength and power of the armor, he realized who it was all about armor and weapons, just as he had assumed. Of course, he immediately pounced on his hater, who was practically naked. Hao Xian wanted to recall some sort of fancy punch, but decided to use a normal fist punch. Hao Xian was open on all sides. The king couldn't even imagine the option of his defeat. He was sure that victory was in his pocket, followed by a devastating blow. It might have seemed as if that blow had pierced half the earth. But somewhere out there, on another continent, everything was fine. The order was different for everyone, and the strength Sun Wukong received hardly affected anything. His body was pierced with hellish pain. It seemed as if dying was easier than feeling something like this, and the consciousness was rushing out. It was difficult to combine body and soul in this position. Everything seemed, as it were, separate from each other. Faith, uncertainty, reason, hope, fetters, time, fate, freedom, chaos. All these things had become so foreign to Sun Wukong, and at the same time, it was as if he had just recognized them. He was just a chick who thought he had found the truth. However, in reality, he was now bereft of everything. This blow was no stronger than the one when the hammer destroyed the dragon in the mountain. If it had been stronger, there would have been nothing left of the king. Sun Wukong's powerful body had withstood something like this. Now he was wondering to himself how he had managed to survive something like this. But the truth, he could not comprehend. So Hao Xian had to explain that it was the voice of the Tao, a type of power of the great Tao. But how could Sun Wukong do that? Right now, he was too obsessed with his perfection.
Whether it was the quest for immortality or the search for the strongest weapon, which the king himself was well aware of, Sun Wukong was unwilling to recognize one truth. The great Tao is imperfect.
Only by abandoning the eternal search for perfection and embracing both order and chaos can he see the true meaning of the great Tao. Only then will the martial art of Sun Wukong become not just a technique, but a true art, and the power of the limit, the great Tao of the imperfect. Would this be a new stage of something great for him? All the old knowledge, all the old beliefs had shattered like shards of ice underwater. Now the realization of something greater came to him. At that very moment, Sun Wukong felt something inside him begin to crumble. And with that, a huge gate appeared before him. Behind this gate, he saw something he couldn't even imagine. He had been chasing after it for so long, but came to it after a risky venture. Sun Wukong had managed to find his new path of Tao. Sun Wukong had reached 30% of his potential strength. The quest was successfully completed. For this, Hao Xian had received the card of the great sage Naija. Who would have thought that each quest would be rewarded with a card from one of the 12 peak-formed masters of the Heavenly Palace? Hao Xian was so happy that he was ready to cry. Moreover, he didn't have to worry about his own safety. In addition, Hao Xian had become a great benefactor of Sun Wukong, who was now asking to be his disciple. Hao Xian was only willing to accept the Monkey King as a disciple under one condition. He should say this condition, and Sun Wukong will do his best. If Sun Wukong wants to become Hao Xian's disciple, he'll have to give up all the girly niceties. His whole life flew before Sun Wukong's eyes. What do you mean? Give up completely? This condition frightened him more than the past battle. But if he swears to it, then Hao Xian will accept him as a disciple, become a strong and unwavering man, or remain a sissy with strange hobbies. The choice was up to Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong was facing a difficult choice, as if he was facing a decision that cost him his life. What would he choose? To be Hao Xian's disciple, or to leave all his cute little tricks behind? Of course, he couldn't give up what he loved. These tattoos were very precious to him. That being a disciple of the best Tao was nothing to him compared to them. He knew that real men shouldn't have such hobbies. But he couldn't help himself. He just liked it, and that was it. These words were a cry of the soul, but Hao Xian almost died laughing and could barely contain himself from giving away. Actually, the guy was just kidding. After all, as long as it didn't harm the rest of us, people can like anything. Anyone who ridicules other people's hobbies is an idiot. Notice that Hao Xian had just made fun of Sun Wukong. But if anyone dares to say that Sun Wukong is weird, Hao Xian, as his teacher, would gladly help him beat the crap out of him. Well, now it's time to move forward. There's nothing to dig around for. Immortals and other monkeys also asked Hao Xian to apprentice, but he had to refuse because there were too many of them, and it increased the risks of getting into some dangerous situation. But what's wrong with this fantasy world in the first place? That dragon serving the monkey didn't look like a traditional Eastern dragon. That creature was clearly from the West. And then there are the magic spells, also clearly Western paraphernalia. The locals weren't surprised by this at all. Are they really used to this? Didn't the system say that in 700 years some Western organization would come here and turn everything upside down? It was the system itself that interrupted these thoughts. It appeared so suddenly that Hao Xian's heart almost stopped. Hao Xian had a new assignment. He needed to send to the Nuer Kingdom to find the 9 Heavens fairy warrior girl who was currently in the initial stage of cultivation. He needed to help her gain 30% of her potential power. The first woman in the history of the Heavenly Palace who managed to become an immortal goddess was the fairy of the 9 Heavens. The names of such mythical characters really frightened Hao Xian. The main palace of the Nuer Kingdom, that is, the Kingdom of Women, was one of the most mysterious places in this universe. For example, in front of you is the dungeon of this kingdom, where a demoness in chains is already located. It's quite possible that Xiliang deserves to be the ruler of this country. She's a head above those people from the minor sex, even though she's already the queen of Nui Air. After 3 days of fierce battle, Xiliang still managed to defeat this demon. It was better for him to abandon his futile attempts to escape and just give up. He wouldn't be able to escape even if he turned his body into dust. The demon was already caught under the influence of Xiliang's 1,000 possibilities formation. She was certain that there was no one in this world who was capable of breaking out of it. However, the demon did not expect anything less from the strongest formation master on the continent. However, what if the demon told her that he had managed to master the power of the limit? He couldn't say it in time because the power of the limit had already started its effect, absorbing Queen Nui air into the hole. And there wasn't even anything to hold on to. She was forced to fall into that abyss. There was absolute emptiness and darkness here. This power was exhilarating and frightening. Such is the power of the demon's limit, the power of the king. Here the demon was the truest god. He had unlimited power. Therefore, without any problems, he could also chain Zhi Liang as well as she could chain him. Unfortunately for her, she was now in the territory of the demon kingdom, where she had no power here. Has Queen Nuyer lost already? Is her entire kingdom going to belong to a demon now? What about her? Will she belong to the demon too? After 7 days, our hero finally reached the border of Nuyer Kingdom. This kingdom was very close, and half a day would be enough to reach it. But Hao Xian dragged it out until the last day. No matter what indulgences the system gave him, Hao Xian still didn't have a huge desire to fulfill this idiotic quest. But does Sun Wukong have to be in a similar form? The master himself had ordered him to dress like that, and now he wanted to see how it turned out. Sun Wukong of course loved all sorts of cute things, but this was already a bit too much. He was so ashamed that he couldn't just walk around, but there was no shame in it, and the teacher said it was part of his training. Sun Wukong would understand later. Would a master do anything to the detriment of his apprentice? Actually, Sun Wukong was thinking about something else. After all, who would want to attack such a harmless and cute little guy? The number of potential enemies would be reduced by as much as 50%. It was an ingenious plan, but nevertheless the enemies still remained from that other 50%. Two strangers decided to appear before our heroes. They have never seen either Hao Xian or Sun Wukong, which means we can judge that they are not from around here. They were probably looking for a place to sleep, and this old man had some spare rooms where they could have a good time and spend some money. What did he mean by spending some money? These last 3 words looped in Hao Xian's mind. A cold sweat covered him as he began to visualize different pictures to himself. What was he thinking on? There was no need to think with the dirty standards of his world. This was the world of immortal cultivators. This kind of thing was impossible here. Hao Xian might have made a mistake, and this can't be the case here. But it can't. And that's what the old man himself said. What's the meaning of this? In the real world and the world of immortals, there are also such lustful affairs? Hao Xian hurried away, for he was still a minor. He didn't want to get involved in this in any way. But the old man still detained him, reminding him that his head had already taken over the Nuyer Kingdom. The whole city, full of the most beautiful women, was entirely at the disposal of these filthy male hands. If guys don't believe it, they can take a look at it in person. And so as not to waste time walking around, then the stranger decided to demonstrate it through a balloon. Many famous maidens of the Nuyer Kingdom could be seen there, and all of them were now half naked. But this did not impress Hao Xian in any way. On the contrary, he was scared and perplexed. The stranger thought the guys just didn't believe him, so he decided to show something else more exciting, in his opinion. As for boundaries in relation to women, no one could think of anything the old man couldn't provide. He didn't feel sorry for the women at all. These people were using them as mere commodities, and worse. Only these filthy bastards had flooded not only Hao Xian but also his disciple Sun Wukong. No matter how cruel the king seemed to be to his enemies, what he had just seen had crossed all boundaries. Sun Wukong had no intention of feeling sorry for this freak, and wished to destroy him. To think a stranger approached them with the best of intentions, and now he's being beaten. The Monkey King was going to send this pervert to heaven and his companion too. Only the teacher stopped him, and afterwards he apologized for his student, for he was quite hot and did not understand many things. So they decided to leave quickly. There was nothing to linger here. And what non-familiars would let these guys off so easily? The main one of them quickly recovered and offered to leave as well. The one they were looking for couldn't be that kid, for the one they were looking for was so cowardly. Sun Wukong was very angry at his master. You could tell the king was a fighter for justice, and he felt sorry that they had so cowardly run away, tucking their tails. But admitting that he was angry with his teacher, Sun Wukong wasn't going to admit it. If those strangers were telling the truth, it meant that their leader had really taken over the entire kingdom. With that kind of power, would they lure some vagabonds to them like that? They were probably just trying to catch someone and use them as bait. The teacher was really far-sighted, not like his student, who didn't even realize it. Perhaps the entire Nuyer Kingdom was one big bait for someone bigger. But Sun Wukong was wrong if he thought that the teacher had decided to just leave them alone. Hao Xian wanted to kill all those bastards. That was why he wanted to scare them away. This explanation was followed by an apology from the disciple, Sun Wukong apologized that the only student dared to mistake the teacher for a cowardly rat who runs away from all sorts of problems. Sun Wukong even had time to think that Hao Xian's previous strength was some kind of trick. Now he thought that he deserved to die, and asked the master to punish him. But in fact, Hao Xian really ran away because of his cowardice, and after analyzing the situation, he came to this conclusion. It can be said that our hero has an unrealistic luck to get out of such situations. The teacher didn't want to waste any time and decided to sneak into town and play for surprises. But someone has already managed to call them dirty scum. The girl thought these strangers were their accomplices, so she was going to attack the guys next. It was those two, but a spell had been cast on them to make them smaller. Hao Xian met up with his goal of the second quest, the Nine Heavens Fairy. That girl was the fairy of the Nine Heavens, and she was very angry because she couldn't ignore the way these men treated women like they were some kind of toys. These guys had really pissed her off, and now she wanted our heroes dead. Hao Xian tried to talk to the girl, after all. This was a misunderstanding, and they had nothing to do with this matter at all. But the apprentice felt that the master had no need to justify himself to this woman. P.S. This is a patient with brain aggression. Don't be surprised that he reacts like this. Sun Wukong's hands had been itching for a battle for a long time. Now was the time. This time, the Monkey King wasn't going to spare his potential enemy, and rushed into battle, protecting his teacher first and foremost. The Fairy of the Nine Heavens was not an easy woman either. She did not receive such a title for nothing, for she possessed serious strength and determination. But only she attacked not Sun Wukong but his clone, but she realized it quickly enough. But not enough, because it was too late. This first round was for Sun Wukong. He was able to anticipate such actions from the fairy and reassured himself beforehand. No matter how strong this blow was, it didn't kill the Nine Heavens Fairy. Although Sun Wukong didn't often encounter those who were able to move after his strike, the enemy was worthy of the Monkey King's respect. But only the king boasted himself not very long, because the fairy could not only move, but also respond with a blow of her own. Her sword movements had an inhuman speed, and to anticipate where after would be the sword strike would be simply impossible. They were on all sides. So let's wish Sun Wukong good luck and patience with this. But in the end, he flew far away. Was he alive now? Yes. The two men now held a grudge against each other for the blows they'd taken. The Nine Heavens Fairy was very strong. Even the teacher didn't expect her to be able to injure Sun Wukong after he awakened. Just now is not the time to be nervous, and now is not a good time to use your cards. There was only hope for Sun Wukong. Would he be able to handle her? This woman was really strong. If it was Sun Wukong's past, he wouldn't be able to answer the master's question with certainty. However, now that the master had shown him a new path, Sun Wukong was confident that he would be able to overpower her. Wait, did the student mean to say that he's mastered the power of the limit? That's right. Only the master refused to believe it. In his opinion, it was simply impossible. But it was true. The apprentice, of course, wouldn't be able to deliver the same punch as the master's punch. But she would be satisfied with what Sun Wukong had learned. If master didn't believe Sun Wukong, there was nothing left for him to do but prove it. A strange fluctuation of spiritual energy began to be felt from Sun Wukong. The great Tao is imperfect. You just have to understand the chaos and accept it, and then merge with chaos. That would be the invisible force. Sun Wukong had truly mastered the power of the great Tao. The pseudo-master was simply shocked by this. The disciple came from the master himself. This guy just took one look at it and immediately achieved enlightenment. Sun Wukong was simply progressing at an abnormal speed. The Nine Heavens Fairy felt that there was definitely something wrong with this technique. It seemed very wrong to her. But why? She couldn't answer that question. That one small ball of light made Zhuan Yu feel something she had never felt before. An incredible pressure. If she did nothing, she would surely die. She had to act fast. The fairy was suppressing Sun Wukong's limit strength with her ordinary ki. How was this even possible? But it wasn't her aura. That pressure was coming from her swords. Each one of them was a true, legendary treasure. At this moment, Sun Wukong realized what kind of woman she was. Besides, in all his years of searching, Sun Wukong had never found a single treasure. Only he didn't care, because this woman's strength was nothing in front of his master's power. Strange things began to happen to the power of the great Tao. This power had become simply uncontrollable. Sun Wukong no longer had any power over her. The power of the great Tao had power over him. He could almost destroy the woman, but the overexertion was taking its toll, and he could no longer control even his own body. Hao Xian rushed to his disciple's aid. At this moment, he was not only worried about his life, but also Sun Wukong's life. Fortunately, his disciple was fine, but he wouldn't be able to move for a while. The power of the limit was too powerful. As long as Sun Wukong couldn't control it, it would give such side effects. The master was confident that Sun Wukong would curb the power of the limit after a few training sessions and would certainly help him do so. But the Nine Heavens Fairy didn't expect the minions of the lustful Demon King to be so strong. The woman had underestimated them. But what should Hao Xian do? Will he have to use the power of the cards again? To avoid using cards, after all, Hao Xian decided to try to negotiate. After all, Fairy had gotten it all wrong. They were not the minions of the lustful demon she spoke of. But the apprentice didn't understand why the master was messing around with this woman. With that kind of power, he could just kill her. On the other hand, what's the point of fighting everyone you meet? You have to use something that every immortal wears around his neck once in a while. In order to obtain the power of Neja Peak form, Hao Xian would need to last for 10 minutes after activating the card. Wukong, who was the main fighter, was now unable to fight. First, you need to placate Xuanyu and gain her trust, and then you can act according to the situation. Hao Xian started to convince Xuanyu that they were good guys like her. Besides, they wanted to sneak into the kingdom to free the hostages from the Demon King's oppression. Surely Xuanyu must have planned to do this too, which was so. But what was the proof that they weren't with demons? There was no proof, but Hao Xian believed that she was such a brave, valiant, and beautiful girl would never kill some people just because of the suspicion of colluding with the Demon King. Hao Xi immediately noticed her martial and noble aura. And how could he not notice it when she was shining like the brightest star in the sky? He could guess that she cared about the lives of ordinary people, so she wasn't capable of killing innocents. Hao Xian got right to the point and made an absolutely correct point. Xuanyu would rather let thousands go by mistake than kill one innocent. But she still wasn't going to let the guys go until they provided her with proof of their innocence. However, that wasn't a problem. Hao Xian already had an idea. Why wouldn't the girl take them with her to the Nui Air Kingdom? If she had any doubts about them, Xuanyu could finish them off right away. After thinking for a second, she agreed, because the plan was really not bad. In fact, if it wasn't for Hao Xian's eloquence, the guys would probably have turned into chops. Who wouldn't buy a good word? There was nothing more to talk about, so they decided to go on their way. Xuanyu was used to being alone, and didn't like being too close to her. So she asked the boys to stay 2 jang away from her, about 7 meters away. Why is the sister so cold? The guys seem to have become her battle buddies. She is. I think she's ready to kill them already. This kind soul decided to take pity on Hao Xian, and just warned him not to pick on her anymore for the first time. It was hurtful and painful, but I had to keep my distance. Hao Xian clearly kept his distance after this incident, as agreed, so as not to incur Xuanyu's wrath again. An arrogant nature and a bunch of legendary artifacts. Sun Wukong, we're sure that woman is the daughter of that sword demon. Sun Wukong was referring to the Linghuan sword demon. Many people must have heard of him, but not Hao Xian. Should Master really pay attention to him? Lin Huang was a sword master who was at the top of the Heavenly Palace's list of masters. He was also the only known member of the mysterious Chakra organization. This story was followed by more questions about the list of Heavenly Palace masters, about the chakra. But Sun Wukong didn't know everything, only assumed that it meant that Lin Huang was one of the strongest masters of the Heavenly Palace. But something didn't add up here. A person with such a powerful ancestor should have already known about the existence of the power of limit. Yet, judging from her reaction, this was the first time she had seen this power. It was necessary to extract some information from her. So Hao Xian asked for the 2 zhang rule to be lifted. Soon they will have to fight side by side. It would be worth discussing their strategy for this fight. But because of this distance, it will be difficult to agree on anything. But who told him that they would fight side by side? Hao Xian assumed that it would be much more effective, and Sun Wukong had said that he would be able to recover by then. Xuanyu was adamant. She always fought alone and wasn't going to make any exceptions. It was the most strange, because even guys fight together, and she was a girl, who also has too high an opinion of herself. What makes her think she can take care of everyone by herself? Sun Wukong's words were already turning into open insults, but the girl didn't react in any way. However, Xuanyu didn't say that she could defeat them all. Naturally, if she lost and died, it would be the guy's turn to fight. Until then, Shounen doesn't need their help. Looking at her back, which looked like an unreachable ice wall, Hao Xian felt the indescribable loneliness of this girl. After a silent journey, they had reached the Nuier Kingdom after all. This place reeked of something disgusting, and it was hard to imagine what was going on behind those gates. Before going in, Xuanyu decided to repeat herself. so that the guys wouldn't interfere with her fight. However, Hao Xian didn't mind. He liked to stand back and watch the exciting spectacle. Outside the gate, there was indeed a horror. Some monsters were already reigning over the kingdom. Another bunch of idiots came right at the hands of this monster, just as the man had actually hoped they would. This thing was at the Demon King stage. In addition, unfortunately, Sun Wukong had not had time to fully recover. We had to think of something soon. If Xuan Yu abandoned them, they would definitely die. But was there any way to kick these worms out of the demon race? Even the thought of Sun Wukong being with this abomination of the same race stirred him unpleasantly. All they could think about was being scared and talking while the sister was already raring to go. Hao Xian didn't even have time to think of anything. There was no plan. What would happen if this thing decided to start with the guys? That won't happen because Xuan Yu will distract and deal with this thing herself. She would have the strength to do so. This fight lasted for about 3 minutes, and that was enough time to deal with a bunch of scum. Xuan Yu killed the Demon King with a single blow, but that wasn't the real king. The real fight is just ahead. The king's favorite toy was killed with a single swing of his sword. Well, Xuan Yu possessed a truly worthy strength of her descendant of a great sword demon. Was this monster really an acquaintance of Xuan Yu's father? One could even say that this was more than just an acquaintance. Lin Huang and the Demon King were bound by a blood feud. If you can't kill the older one, you can kill the younger one. That was the Demon King's thoughts, and he didn't have a shred of conscience. And now he was ready to show all his power as king, which was the power of the limit. He was considered absolutely invincible in this area, and the best in the business. He was sure that he would be able to nail the boys with just one finger. But before doing so, for reassurance, he decided to still tie up Lin Huang's daughter. The mortal and the Demon King were in a pitiful state, and there was no way these two could save Xuan Yu. But the girl didn't need anyone to save her. With her power, she began to summon all of her found swords and called them to her. But what the hell? That girl was in the realm of demonic power! But the king did not take into account one thing, that there was no absolute invulnerability in this world. The Demon King was really strong. However, the Xuan Yu formation, which consisted of legendary swords, was also strong enough to resist the enemy. Furthermore, compared to the strength of that monkey, the strength of the Demon King is ridiculous. Sun Wukong was only too happy to confirm this, for the strength of this king's limit was no match for Master Sun Wukong's strength. The student wanted to praise his teacher, but the teacher didn't like it very much. If he decided to attack them, what would they do? Of course, the demon was not going to give up, and decided to gather his bone army with the help of dark magic. But he can't take Xuan Yu's strength in quantity because she has the strength of the sword art, the Sakura petal dance. These two were very strong, and Wukong still hadn't recovered. Hao Xian would have to back up and use his trump card after all. If the king of his quest dies, then Hao Xian will be finished as well. Fortunately, the Necha card had already been activated. Hao Xian would be able to transform into peak form in 5 minutes. This was already very satisfying. Did the system really give more and more plushies with each completed task? In battle, through the art of the sword, the bones did break closer to her, having to use extra defense. But with the extra protection, the king also stepped up and decided to give the girl another gift. Now this weirdo had decided to go for size rather than quantity. But Xuan Yu hurriedly upset him, because that wouldn't work either. For every action of King Xuan Yu, she found a counter to it. This time, she used the heavenly treasure, Qianmu Huang. This thing was as powerful as a staff with golden hoops. After all, it was a heavenly treasure. Just sticking the sword in like that would be ineffective, so the girl decided to use the Phoenix Fall technique. It was a technique that destroyed all defenses and all enemy attacks. He didn't stand a chance against her. Maybe the king wanted to hope that this was not the end, but he could only raise his head and look the girl in the eyes, because now he was on his knees before her like a defeated man. Letting him go was certainly not an option. Killing Xuan Yu didn't want to kill him either, so she decided to chain him to the chains that hung from the swords. Someone there said that in his realm of the king's power he is absolutely invincible. Well, the same could be said of the world of illusion in which the girl had placed her enemy. A second in the outside world would seem like an eternity to a demon here. Naturally, in Xuan Wu's world of illusion, he would be under tremendous pressure. 10 seconds later, the demon began to weaken, and soon completely collapsed. All the fog from earlier had completely cleared. It was as if everything was back to normal. It felt like dawn after the night's carnage. Hao Xian didn't understand what had happened and why the demon had fallen. But Sun Wukong could guess that it was the same secret spell that had been rumored. Someone said that this strange spell was only wielded by members of a few high families. Plus, her eyes were exactly as they should be after such a spell. The demon should have surrendered, for in this state, he was no longer an opponent to Xuanyu. This was to be expected from the daughter of a sword demon. This demon knew that it couldn't overpower Xuanyu, but he had his own trump cards up his sleeve. The girl probably didn't think about why the demon had chosen the New Year Kingdom. It was for a reason, because there were special formations here. The demon was trying to take this whole battle out with his location, which was playing into his hands right now. The girl could now feel that same terrifying pressure. The New Year Kingdom was just a bait to trap Xuanyu, and the great information of this place did an excellent job of acting as this trap. Even she, the daughter of a sword demon, wouldn't be able to resist a formation that gathered all the power of an entire kingdom specializing in these very formations. But this girl was not to be underestimated. She was strong in spirit and was not going to surrender so easily into the clutches of this vile demon. She had trump cards up her sleeve as well, namely the Dharma appearance of a 1,000-hearted emperor. One of the majestic spells of this world. Even the guys had never had to see such a spell, but they had heard of it. Was the demon still confident that he could handle Xuanyu? First of all, he would have to deal with the final appearance of the 1,000-armed emperor. Did she seem to be joking? How on earth would he, a lowly demon, be able to handle the spell she had gotten from the sword demon himself? But his confident demeanor said otherwise. And for good reason. Because he wouldn't have to deal with a 1,000-armed emperor. In such matters, the most important thing was thorough preparation. Of course, Xuanyu hadn't really prepared for such a battle because she was quite strong from her early training. But she hadn't expected such a trick from the demon. The demon didn't even have to say anything else. Everything became very clear. Influencing the formations of this kingdom with his negligible power, he was able to subdue it and thus destroy his enemies. Xuanyu found herself in shackles that would be difficult for her to get out of. And the most frustrating thing is that the guys couldn't do anything to help right now. The demon was actually shocked that this idea worked. But he actually knew about the weak point of Xuanyu's last trump card about the 1,000-hearted emperor. The weak point was the girl's body. Once her body is formed, it is virtually invulnerable, however. If someone manages to injure her body, it will almost immediately dissipate and backfire. Naturally, this weakness is compensated for by the terrifying strength and durability of the guys. But what if the demon attacks her from within? The 1,000 Black Emperor would begin to dissipate, which was happening right now. But were they really those two dolls? Xuanyu put them in her storage ring, but it turned out to be a trap. So much for the reverse reaction from the dispersion of appearance and the great formation of the New Year realm. Now Xuanyu was no more dangerous to the demon than an ordinary mortal. He specifically took advantage of her love of punishing bad guys and turning them into dolls with his special spells. Clever, isn't it? And now the girl didn't even have the courage to kill, and she dared to call herself a descendant of a sword demon. Her mercy drove her to her grave. She was hurt and scared, but this was the demon's revenge. After all, Wan Yu's father had once done the same thing to this demon's people once before. If she doesn't call her comrades for help, she'll die soon. But Xuan Yu didn't consider them comrades, and wasn't going to call them for help, so the demon could end it. The girl wished the demon would just finish her off, but he thought that would be too easy. He decided that he would torture her as Lin Huang had done, but he would do it even more painfully than him. What annoyed the demon most of all was that the girl pretended like she didn't care. He wished he could see her fear, her face disfigured by terror, but it wasn't happening. So he decided to torture her slowly, starting at her feet. Or she might run away from him again. To make the blow more powerful, he jumped on the mountain on purpose, but as soon as he stepped back, it disappeared. She herself would not have the strength to leave. Hao Xian, who had already activated the card, came to her aid. He was surprised that this girl was really the kind of girl who would rather die than ask for help. Even though Hao Xian had a girlish appearance, Xuan Yu still recognized him. She recognized the aura, but she didn't understand how this was even possible and started squirming as if she was afraid of being harassed. Hao Xian didn't have good control over these things. If the girl continued to twitch, they would risk falling together. The demon had already realized too that this guy was no ordinary mortal, but again he asked himself the same question. Why hadn't he sensed that powerful aura in him before? Demon's gonna have to put everything he's got left into one punch. Then he can finish him off with that girl. He used the power of the limit. Xuan Yu started to panic and asked to leave her, and for Hao Xian to just run away from here. But he has strength. Now he just wouldn't want to give it all up. The power of the limit now was like a challenge to him, and he didn't mind competing. Why not show that insolent demon something like this? It was a blow that reverberated throughout the kingdom. But it was only directed at the demon, so it didn't affect the others, although it did scare them. Sun Wukong was more proud of his teacher than ever. This was the true power of the limit. Hao Xian recreated the appearance of the Dharma of the Great Tao. How could a demon be able to resist Hao Xian in the form of Xuanyu after this? He couldn't even speak, let alone move. Hao Xian was a bit patient, so he waited for the demon to at least say something. In fact, he had a lot of things he wanted to say, but he couldn't utter a word. At this moment, he remembered that he was a formidable carnivorous eel in his past life. He was the true master of this body of water. All other fish either swam away when they saw him or became his food. Even if they were the lords of other territories, everyone without exception became his victims. In time, he became someone that other fish were afraid to even mention. A long life at the top of the food chain has convinced him that he is the true king of this world. And so it was until one fateful day. On that day, an underwater vortex swept through his waters, throwing the king eel outside his body of water. And then he encountered true immensity for the first time in his life. That's when he came face to face with the true lords of the seas. Our little king eel wasn't able to say anything either. He could only watch in silence as he became a victim, like the small fish he had once eaten. And in this life, even though all memories of past lives are fading, he managed to remember that little eel's despair before the masters of the seas, and remembered how he had paid for his self-confidence. The demon who thought he was a king was already surrendering and begging for mercy. He was willing to serve Hao Xian for the rest of his life, just to live. Hao Xian didn't like this outcome because he had spent his last trump card on him, and now this asshole was giving up and didn't even want to fight. This was a mockery. Hao Xian didn't even want to listen to this nonsense and urged this jerk to stand up and fight him. But he wouldn't budge. You see, he thought he was just a little ant in front of the master. No matter how much he begged him to fight, he didn't want to die. Xuanyu kept standing aside and didn't interfere. At this time, the unimaginable power of Neja's peak form caused the girl to plunge into her own memories, because she only felt such power from one man. I was her father. Xuanyu began to follow her father and cultivate from an early age, and almost always the cultivation environment was not a pleasant one. However, her father always remained only a powerful and unreachable back for her. She could not go near him even while eating or sleeping, for he had always told her that solitude was the most important thing, the quality of a strong man. Despite enduring the pain and not being able to understand it, Xuanyu continued to believe her father. But on one of her cultivation days, she continued to follow her father at a distance of 2 zheng. She followed this rule strictly, but at one point she was distracted because she heard some sound in the bushes. There was a very small fox dabbling there, who was happy to see the girl. It was her first encounter with someone in this cold forest. The fox was very friendly that the girl was even unaccustomed to such friendliness. Xuanyu felt intimacy with another being for the first time at this moment. Her heart was gripped by a feeling unknown to her. But it didn't last long. All feelings were shattered along with the fox. A father mercilessly trampled an innocent animal right in front of his daughter. Did she really think of taking him with her? There's no way. How did father raise her? But she remained silent, unable to utter a word in reply. So many things had happened for her at that moment, and all of them contradicted each other. There was no use arguing with her father, so she just apologized because she knew she wasn't allowed to tame anyone. She had to remember that loneliness and indifference were the best paths to greatness. No, they're not. These are the only right ways. Since then, Xuanyu no longer dared to get close to other living beings. Days, weeks, years passed, but the lonely figure of the girl in the icy wilderness remained unchanged. Soon she herself realized that her father was telling the truth, for her strength began to grow like yeast. However, the feeling never left her that she had lost something important in exchange. And now she was looking at this not-so-serious guy in front of her. He kept pounding out a battle for himself, even though the enemy had already surrendered. Obviously, in her father's opinion, he was a complete non-entity, yet he possessed a strength that was not the least bit inferior to Lin Huang's might. For the first time, Xuanyu doubted the words of her father, who was a true god to her, so the girl made a fateful decision for herself. Hao Xian still couldn't settle down because this idiot had made him spend his last card. But I still had to take my mind off the battle and listen to the girl. Who wanted to be Hao Xian's disciple? That was certainly a good thing, but on the other hand, what's a poor guy who can barely teach Sun Wukong to do? First of all, the system rewarded Hao Xian with his completed quest, for the worldview of the Nine Heavens Fairy had undergone a significant change. Xuan Yu had reached 35% of his potential strength. As a reward, Hao Xian received a map of the great sage Yan Wang. Yan Wang is the Lord of Hell, the afterlife. What was Hao Xian doing in the first place to receive such a reward? He didn't know himself. This is what the capital of the afterlife looks like. This is where almost all the dead people live. And this is the king's palace, where the young master is still awake. He concentrated his ki in his hand, with the intention of breaking that pearl ball. He probably had to apply most of his chi energy to do so, but in the end, he still cracked that pearl. The ward was delighted that the young master was able to crack the dragon pearl with just the power of his chi. A dragon pearl was the hardest material in the entire afterworld. In terms of ki, the Lord should have already been among the top 100 masters of the heavenly palace. But the Lord didn't think so. He felt that he was a loser, as he could never compare to the masters of the heavenly palace. He could only hope that at least he wouldn't be punished this time. Oh, but what was that rascal laughing at? He must have been proud of it too, huh? The son was very afraid of his father and would never even try to cross him. Experiencing his father's anger was one of the worst things that could have happened to him. I had to give up the dragon pearl. Did this little guy really take pride in making the dragon pearl crack? The stern father decided to demonstrate how he had shattered the dragon pearl with just one hand without even straining. By doing so, he wanted to demonstrate that his son wasn't even something to be proud of. A crack in a pearl is no reason to be proud. He may have realized it, but was there any shame in it? Maybe to him it was, because that wasn't how his father had raised him. The young man felt that words would be unnecessary here. But my father wanted to hear the answer, because he had asked him a question. And this brat was still silent. Well, the father had to force these answers out of his son. Yan Wang only wanted to remind him that this boy was only a talentless, pathetic brat whom the heavens had bestowed talent upon. Even if a young man put in a lot of effort, he would at most become a third-rate master. And if he doesn't try hard enough, he won't even get that. After the young master must go into confinement for 10 days and think hard about his father's words. There was no point in objecting, but there was no point in remaining silent. All the young man could do was agree. Somewhere deep in the mountains, the warriors had set up a temporary camp. There was one idiotic rule in the camp. The warriors had to take their toilet 30 jang away from the camp. It was terribly inconvenient, but it couldn't be helped. After all, the army of Imperial horsemen is invincible precisely because of strict discipline. Only a strange sound distracted them. Someone had tossed them a basket. But the basket wasn't empty. It contained a bunch of faceless skulls that moved while doing so. The senior soldier didn't see any point in panicking. After all, it was probably just another nasty trick of one of the demonic sects. He even thought it would be boring again, but not this time. Now one of the soldiers was dead, and the other was surrounded by strange creatures that were clearly not with good intentions. A man against them was just a defenseless mosquito. His death was obvious. But let's go back to our heroes, who have already traveled as a threesome for 10 days. After Hao Xian and Xuan Yu's Nui kingdom from the lustful demon king, they almost immediately left. In fact, the master simply couldn't bear the endless gratitude from the entire kingdom, which, let me remind you, was all women. Carrying his disciple wasn't easy either. It had been a long time, but he still couldn't recover and move like before. In addition, Sun Wukong not only hadn't recovered, but had fallen into a deep sleep. This meant that Hao Xian had to walk alone with Xuan Yu the entire way. No matter how much the teacher tried to get his new student to talk, there was nothing to talk about. Not because she didn't want to, but because she had devoted all her time to martial arts alone. She didn't have any funny stories from her past because she just practiced every day and that's it. Hao Xian thought that everyone had some interests. One could talk about them along the way. But other than martial arts, there was nothing else to discuss with Xuan Yu. The teacher wasn't very good at martial arts, and it wasn't a very interesting topic. So they had to walk in absolute silence. And this monkey still didn't wake up, thus embarrassing Hao Xian. Sun Wukong's breathing was normal, so it was unlikely that something serious was going on with him. But why he wasn't waking up was still unknown. And most strangely of all, after using the second sage card, a vague feeling of some kind of power appeared in Hao Xian's body. A feeling as if it was very familiar to him, or even if it wasn't. It was as if this power originally belonged to him. Fortunately, the guys finally reached the right place, as notified by the system. But another question loomed. What was the Lord of the Afterlife doing in one of the tents of mortals? Coming closer, our heroes could notice many dead warriors, and they were not killed in battle. It was as if all the blood and organs had been sucked out of their bodies. There was not a single drop of blood near them. It was clear that there was no battle here. It was something that destroyed them without any pity. Besides, these corpses had a lot of yin energy. Even dead people shouldn't have so much yin energy. Yan Wang's location wasn't here. Hao Xian needed to go further. Following the system's instructions, they came across the entrance to a cave of some sort. Hao Xian was terribly reluctant to go in. He hoped that he was definitely not there. That's how our hero is, afraid of caves. There was a reason why he associated caves with witches, corpses, scary creatures, and the living dead. Hao Xian was scared shitless by movies and books about tomb raiding. He was better off falling through the ground than going into this cave. But on the other hand, if he didn't complete this quest, he was going to die soon, and he didn't want to go back to Earth. He liked it here because he didn't have to worry about ordinary things. In addition, here he was the master for the two strongest immortals, even though he himself was a weak mortal who wasn't capable of anything if it wasn't for the system. Xuan Yu began to sense something and guessed that the teacher was scared, but he would not admit it in any case. He attributed his delay to ordinary boredom. So boring that one might want to pretend to be a weakling. Of course, the student believed him. A master was a master. Though it was hard for her to understand what the teacher was thinking, Xuan Yu had always trusted her elders. So she decided to check out this cave herself, even though the teacher tried to stop her. Going in was still necessary. Hao Xian had to go through fear, but he still found himself in the heart of his fear. The cave was very spacious, and the place was not at all like the Tomb Raider chronicles described. In addition, Xuan Yu noticed that the concentration of yin energy increased with every step she took. Master played his role so realistically, Xuan Yuan thought. He must be an excellent actor. In fact, our hero heard some strange sound. It was very eerie that the blood in his veins ran cold, but it was just an ordinary frog, and Hao Xian's heart almost stopped. No danger was observed, maybe it's time to relax? Stop, we're analyzing what's going on. All of them king stage demons were here. The inhabitants of the underworld couldn't just wander around on the ground like this. Then how did these demons end up here? There was something wrong here, and it needed to be found out right away. But before that, Hao Xian was already starting to die. One of the king stage demons grabbed him in its clutches. Hao Xian started yelling and asking for help from at least someone. Maybe Xuan Yu would help, but teacher told her himself to ignore it if he pretended to be weak. So no big deal, the master was incredibly strong, so he must have been faking it again. But what's with that calm smile? Now her master is going to die. Really die if the girl doesn't help him. He was already almost 1 foot in the demon's mouth, but the girl still didn't react. This time it was over. Now he would definitely become someone's fodder. It would have been better for him to just admit that he wasn't a cultivator. But it was too early to get discouraged. Just at the point where the teacher was about to be absorbed, Sun Wukong woke up after a long rest. As his teacher had taught him, the Great Tao is imperfect. However, it gave birth to all things. If anyone stands in Sun Wukong's way, he will immediately clear the way. The fight was uneven, several top-ranked demons, against a Monkey King who only has 30% of his strength. He's just waking up and could be in a bad spot. But fortunately, the teacher warned him in time, the dangers behind him. During this time of having to lie unconscious, Sun Wukong had recharged his strength a bit and was stronger than before. Perhaps he had become enlightened during this time, or perhaps he was simply bored with inactivity. Either way, he had worked to the limit of his strength. The great masters had said that the less one thought about martial arts, the deeper one could delve into the great Tao. Now Sun Wukong understood why the masters were of this opinion. The enemies were still not destroyed, but Sun Wukong's spirit power was strong enough to resist them all. No matter which sides they attacked from, there was enough power for all of them. The demons were pierced by a bright light against which they were insignificant. The teacher himself marveled at Sun Wukong's strength. This little guy had matured so much. He hoped that the master would be proud of his work. Hao Xian probably wouldn't admit it, but he was just happy that his disciple had given him another chance at life. Sun Wukong's aura changed greatly. It felt like someone completely different in front of him. After seeing the entire battle, Xuan Yu realized that she was now no match for Sun Wukong. Not so long ago, she could beat him. Yes, it was difficult, but still. However, it was different now, and it was all thanks to the master's proper instruction. At this moment, Xuan Yu's respect for Hao Xian grew by leaps and bounds. Her perception of her master was very different from reality. Because of this, the poor girl was faced with a strange feeling for the first time. Her face lit up, and she felt terribly embarrassed, which she was actually embarrassed to admit even to herself. The problem with the enemies was solved. But why was Sun Wukong taking such a long nap? The apprentice was fine. He was asleep because he was fully immersed in repairing his meridians, which had been damaged after he had failed to use the power of the limit. But now he can create as many as 8 Chaos Fusion Orbs. Hao Xian truly admired his disciple after all. He was truly a gifted fellow. Hao Xian only had 10 Great Masters cards left at the peak of their strength. At this rate, pretty soon he would be the one to become their disciple. He had to urgently think of something to become stronger. Hao Xian was sincere with his disciple, but Sun Wukong saw it differently, as if even a child could handle the 8 Chaos Fusion Balls. And actually, all those boastful words sounded like sarcasm in his mind. Was Master really ridiculing him? If he was saying that Sun Wukong was gifted, didn't that mean that the Master was disappointed in him? Would Sun Wukong never be able to become such a great master? All these thoughts flashed through his mind. Lest the Master refused to give up on him, he quickly began to apologize to him. Sun Wukong still had much to learn from his teacher and would not disappoint his master again. But Hao Xian didn't even realize what he was carrying. The system was already congratulating Hao Xian for gaining another 5% of his potential strength. He currently had 35% of his potential. As an additional reward, Hao Xian received a ruler's mask. After each reward, Hao Xian had a question. What did he do to get this? Maybe it was just a sudden stroke of luck. The gift was nice, of course. But what did the mask even do? The system didn't even leave a single clue. Xuanyu didn't understand why Sun Wukong saved the master. In her opinion, he didn't like it. Wasn't Sun Wukong afraid that the master would punish him for it? But it was actually Xuanyu who didn't understand anything, because the master on the contrary liked to be saved while he pretended to be weak. The 3 boys' various musings were interrupted by some ghostly dragon. It was a demon, but how dare it get in here? Sun Wukong didn't hesitate for long and immediately rushed towards the master to protect him. But it just snuck through the guys, as it wasn't something tangible. One demon spread into multiple pieces and became even more elusive. He didn't seem to mean any harm, but was just passing by. But if you looked closer, you could see that they were the souls of dead mortals. Usually they could only be seen due to special magical weapons, but there were rumors that they could become visible due to extreme resentment and hatred. But who killed them? Was it our little Yanwan? We could think about that later, but for now, we need to get back to the pressing matters at hand, where these souls were already flying to another space. This aura was unmistakable. It was hard to believe, but someone had actually dared to secretly open the passage between the 2 worlds. No matter who dared to do it, there was no difference. That person took the lives of the innocent and opened the passage to the underworld. I should have just gone and beaten the bastard up. As confident as the master seemed, his speech had little effect on his students. At least because the master himself stood still, and words alone cannot motivate students. However, Sun Wukong decided to go first. He liked to learn new things, and the teacher did not oppose it, but on the contrary supported it. As a result, the master entered the portal first like a coward. But from the student's side it looked different, as if he was covering them from behind. Upon entering this portal, something amazingly terrifying could be seen. It was an unknown creature with 1 eye and a coffin inside itself. It was also what Hao Xian was most afraid of seeing, the witch in the cave. But there was nothing to fear, for the witch seemed to be sleeping soundly now, though her eye was open. Only Hao Xian wasn't sure about it. He was ready to cower in a corner and not even move. But what kind of example would he set for his students? Xuanyu was much bolder than anyone, so she decided to study this witch while she had the chance. She touched her roots that pierced through the thick stone floor of the cave. She didn't realize anything from the sensation, but a picture of some dead man who was screaming in pain and hopelessness flashed through her mind. It was very clear. Inside this demon were all the recently deceased souls. Apparently, the demon that created this was afraid of being noticed by the inhabitants of the heavenly realm. So he sent his beasts to the mortal world to secretly kill mortals and bring their souls to him. Ideally, the beasts of the afterlife should go into madness when they enter the mortal world. But they also could use magical rituals that allow them to stay in this world for a while. If this witch was able to make the proud demons in the king's stage carry the souls of mortals to her like some slaves, then her power could not be underestimated. But it seems that this sleeping witch, too, is nothing more than a servant. That outcome certainly didn't make it any easier. After all, it meant that there was someone else more powerful than her to manipulate her power. It was all about her coffin, which was in her stomach. That is where the real culprit of all this must be. But how did Xuanyu understand this, since this coffin didn't even have any aura? It really would be impossible to understand just like that. Xuanyu recognized this coffin because it once belonged to an old friend of her father. Lin Huang's old friend was the 10th member of the Heavenly Palace's master list. Sun Wukong was impressed after those words and even doubted whether he had understood it correctly. To think about it, this coffin belonged to one of the 10 strongest masters of the Heavenly Palace. There was no doubt about it, because the girl recognized the unique symbol on that coffin. If that was the case, what were they waiting for? We should have gotten out of here sooner. Thinking such a plan made one feel scared, but it was even scarier when Hao Xian heard a strange voice urging someone to run away, but in a sarcastic tone. Even more frightened, the master jumped into his apprentice's arms, thinking the demon had awakened from its slumber. But it wasn't the witch. The voice came from behind her. It was nothing to worry about, because Sun Wukong would be happy to check it out for himself. Judging from the aura, Sun Wukong could guess that there was indeed someone there, but it wasn't like these three were all in on it. Two of them seemed to be hostages of the third. The demon was so damn disappointed that the right hand of the Lord of the Underworld was capable of very little, that he ended up being held hostage. Escape was out of the question, for it was beyond their power. The deputy tried to convince the villain that the monster he was dealing with was a monster who knew no mercy. That monster killed a fifth of the mortal world's population 30 years ago, and he did it just to relieve his boredom a little. Did the villain think that the monster would reward him for helping him come back to life? In fact, this monster would finish him off as soon as he opened his eyes. But the shower was still not enough. It was still possible to stop. Only the demon wasn't interested in that. The motive for the resurrection was not that the villain hoped for some reward. The reason was something else. The real reason was chaos. It is in chaos that this monster is good. This demon's life is just a paltry price to pay for the monster to be able to return the world to the marvelous appearance of 30 years ago. Therefore, the demon is willing to sacrifice his life for such a thing. Even the mere thought of it sent him into a wild rapture. This demon had gone completely insane. So the deputy decided to buy his ally Xiao He some time. He must escape and report this to the Lord. This matter required the intervention of the Heavenly Palace. The Overlord's right hand was in a disgusting state, but he still had one trump card up his sleeve, so Xiao He had a good chance of escaping. His trump card was the secret technique of 100 souls, 33 souls. This technique would freeze anyone to the bone. But the glass world of the Brother of Light had no effect on this weirdo, who was completely indifferent to such things. He was completely in ice shards. It seemed there was already time to escape, but Xiao He didn't like it. Because if brother continues to use this technique, he will soon die. In order for his brother's death to not seem in vain, Xiao He should just silently run away from here. He said he understood, but decided to use the secret technique of 100 souls, 28 souls, and Shadow Brother's dark spark. Xiao He only prayed that Brother Xiaobai would survive as long as he could help him. But who would help him now? As one might expect, ice and fire were nothing to this demon. Xiao He was already on his last breath after such a blow. That monster would truly plunge this world into despair. But the demon wasn't going to stop at his plan, no matter how much he was asked to. Such requests only whetted the demon's appetite, and he grew more and more certain of his plan, and his desire to destroy the world. Xiao He was still alive. Of course the demon wanted to finish him off. But for some reason, he couldn't succeed. Some kind of barrier had become between Xiao He's body and his fist. Somehow the demon couldn't even move. What happened? Xiaobai felt a very familiar aura. Was it really that? It was the young gentleman who came to the rescue just in time. Hao Xian had found the king of his quest. The system had Junior Yan Wang in mind when it set the goal. It seemed as if it was impossible for anyone to hinder this demon. But in fact, there was nothing Xiao He could do now, no matter what force he used. Not only could he not use his strength, he couldn't even touch that demon's body. But most importantly, he didn't even know what it was. Hence, the angrier he stopped. After this incident, his confidence shattered into dust. In any case, he suspected the culprit to be the young master, but he kept denying it. The gentleman himself was of the opinion that a certain Sillin had done something. After all, he could not stop such a powerful master himself. The young master, the demon thought, seemed to be acting like an ordinary weakling. But with all his gut, he felt goosebumps run through his body at the terrifying aura of the Lord. Realizing that things were bad, and assessing the opponent's strength, the demon came to this conclusion. He wouldn't be able to handle these two. It was decided to ask for help from the other, that is, the witch. A coffin immediately fell out in response to his request, the witch beginning to react to the demon's words. And the demon itself seemed to absorb her energy, absorbing it into itself. Now that he had teamed up with the other, the demon was sure that no one could stop him. He didn't hide his plans. and was ready to kill everyone. But all his plans crumbled like a house of cards because he couldn't even move. It was too much in his opinion. But what pissed him off the most was not knowing who he was dealing with. What had the Lord done to them? What was he doing to them? The young master was still trying to clear up the situation. After all, he was just a worthless little man from the afterlife. And the one who did this to the demon was Mr. Keelan, not him. Well, if no one believed him, he wanted to demonstrate to prove his innocence. With a touch of air, he recreated a huge and powerful beast, the same color as his key. The demon in its clutches was just a small louse. The young master created a legendary beast of the afterlife. The demons seemed to be strong, but he had only heard of this beast in fairy tales. Even his association with the second couldn't compare to the might of this beast. In subconscious convulsions, he tried to think of a way to get out of here alive and wait for the great elder to awaken. The demon couldn't think of anything better than just asking for it. But the young lord couldn't, because his father had given him a clear order. It would seem that the father is not here, and therefore it is possible to give the demon a second chance. But the lord couldn't, because his father would be everywhere. Hao Xian could observe with his own eyes the strength of the 10th-ranked master of the Heavenly Palace. This strength was truly terrifying. But fortunately, Junior Yan Wang was able to handle it. Xuan Yu was misunderstood. After all, she wasn't talking about him, that monster, until he showed up. If he was here, it would be the end of everyone, even the master. But in any case, the strength of even the 10th master on the list was very frightening. Even considering that the monster hadn't appeared yet, and some didn't care at all about the demonstrated strength. Sun Wukong's hands were already itching for a battle, and there was nothing he could do about it. Then why not let your student go if he feels like it? As long as he's careful. Having understood all the instructions, Sun Wukong rushed towards his enemies in joy, already anticipating the may of this battle. It flew at a tremendous speed, but nevertheless, the young lord felt it with an edge, for it was a danger to him. As if automatically he activated his shadow dragon that Yu from the shadows, thus preventing the enemy from getting any closer to him. With strength, young master was certainly not defined by strength. Sun Wukong could personally appreciate it. Only the Monkey King isn't as weak as that guy, because he has the power of the Great Tao, through which he can make this shadow dragon break. Sun Wukong's strength looked terrifying to the young master. It was clear he was already starting to panic. But this was not the end of Sun Wukong's plan, because he wanted to fight and compete. The young master apologized to a certain Mr. Xuan, after all. He would have to bother him, or else he wouldn't be able to handle it. Mr. Xuanwu is one of the patron spirits. Under his protection, one could feel like an impenetrable barrier, like a turtle shell. Not having seen Xuanwu earlier, Sun Wukong struck at lightning speed straight into his shell. It was even more painful than if he had fallen from his cloud. One legendary beast with another. One could only guess where the young master got so many such treasures from. Xuan Yu thought the heavens were truly unfair, but Hao Xian didn't think so, because the girl had a bunch of rare, legendary weapons, and she dared to complain. One had a lot of talent, the other had legendary weapons, and the third was friends with legendary beasts. Only one master had nothing. That's what was really unfair. But the god didn't think so. He only got angry and struck the greedy one with a lightning bolt. After recovering from the blow, Sun Wukong continued to pound out the battle. No matter how hard he tried to break through the barrier on him, not a scratch was left on him. The young lord considered himself unfit to oppose the king, but that didn't make Wukong feel any better. The young master was giving up, but Sun Wukong could feel how strong he was. But it was all thanks to his father's gifts, for without them, the young lord was nothing. The Monkey King felt like he was being made a fool of. He was sure that the summoning of legendary beasts was solely the power of a lord. Such a thing could not be bestowed. What kind of idiot is this? But all this gift, the gentleman still referred to his father, and said he had nothing to do with it. How old is this gentleman? Sun Wukong was clearly annoyed that he was clinging to his father's pants. Well, as it happens, this guy couldn't do anything without his father's permission. Only these words had no effect on Sun Wukong in any way. He continued to insist on his own, and wanted to get the battle from the young master. Zhuan Yuan thought it was ridiculous that the guy called himself nothing, even though he was able to summon legendary beasts. This couldn't even be described by genius alone. But Hao Xian had the feeling that Yan Wang Jr.'s old man had been masterfully brainwashing him for many years. What is brainwashing? The student wondered. In her language, it's like a control spell. Well, to be sure, Hao Xian decided to test his theory, and to begin with, he asked Sun Wukong to stop and pick him up. It seemed like the Monkey King was quite strong, But it wasn't easy to keep the teacher in the air. Hao Xian had one question for the junior. It was already obvious to everyone that the Lord was very strong. So why was he belittling himself like this? But he didn't think he was belittling, because compared to his father, he really wasn't much more than a pile of trash. Did his father tell him that? Didn't the master himself think that this was too much? But the younger Yan Wang thought it was for his own good. Such answers raised other questions for Hao Xian. Had the young master ever gone beyond the afterlife? No, his father told him to keep his socializing to a minimum. The young master's situation is bad enough as it is. And if a man kicks him, it's going to get really bad. Hao Xian's theory turned out to be justified. Junior Yan Wang had indeed been thoroughly brainwashed. But what kind of master would say such a thing to his apprentice? If young master just tells him who that bastard is, he'll deal with him immediately. Hao Xian decided that he'd better apologize to the junior master, thinking that he had mistaken him for someone else. He was sorry if they had offended him in any way. But it was fine, there was no need to apologize. If Hao Xian didn't have any more questions, the young master wouldn't mind going. There were no more questions, and all went about their business. And our boy's business was to keep an eye on the young master. Xuan Yu said that this thing would hide them from the eyes of others, so they would be able to move around like spies. There was nothing to worry about being discovered. After all, this technique had been given to Xuan Yu by his father himself. He had once said that no one but the top 10 masters of the Heavenly Palace would be able to detect Xuan Yu. It seemed as if the master had just let a good student go for no reason at all. Well, why not? After all, the master had planned to take him on as his apprentice. But in fact, the master had his own plan, and the gentleman's self-esteem is too low. If he used his card and showed him his real strength, he wouldn't be able to raise his strength by even a percentage. A different approach was needed in this situation. Hao Xian was certain that the key to Yan Wang's strength lay in his father. The master was completely contemplating his plan, but from the outside it looked like he was feeling ill. Previously, because of his unfathomable strength, Sun Wukong had not sensed even a modicum of inner qi in the teacher. But now, Sun Wukong somehow began to sense a spiritual energy of approximately 7th stage tempering qi from the master. In addition, not only Sun Wukong felt it, but Xuan Yu felt it as well. Only she thought it seemed like it. The 7th stage of qi tempering. So Hao Xian didn't seem to have imagined it either. It was like his body itself was getting stronger after using the Great Sage's cards. Hao Xian guessed and knew. Something strange and familiar feeling was not an illusion. Could it be that once upon a time in the past, the original owner of this body was indeed one of the most powerful masters in the world, and now Hao Xian was gradually regaining his former strength? Could it be that someone had just worked on his memories and indoctrinated him into thinking that he was a loser? I wish it could be like this. Hao Xian's dreams were sweet, but they also had the right to exist. The boys had already arrived on the spot. The master in joy at the possibly gained power ran towards his goal. The martial arts arena of the afterlife called Asura was filled with all mortals. A duel was in full swing in the arena. A skinnier demon was fighting against a skinnier demon. But it seems the skinny demon had a huge advantage in this battle. It was his agility and flexibility of mind to act in critical situations. The spectators were sure that these two were worthy of their title of generals. After all, there was such an immense power coming from this battle. The rest of the demons could only dream of when they would reach their level. Yan Wang watched this battle for a while, but soon stopped. Bunch of miserable lowlifes. It was hardly a fight. The old geezer started showing off again and shouting to everyone that they're just a bunch of crap. 100 years ago, he wouldn't have even looked at these scum. The generals immediately began apologizing for their weakness. But Yan Wang felt that none of them were even worthy of being his subordinate. He ordered all the guys to attack him together. With this, he wanted to show them how high the sky was and how deep the earth was. Those still stood, not understanding the Lord's intentions, but it was an order. Even though it was an order, no one could do it. Of course they dare. They're just lowlifes. It seemed to comfort the gentleman's ego, though he tried not to show it. If any of them had even dared to challenge him, Yan Wang would have respected him as a brave man. But right now, they were all just cowardly insects in his eyes. Only the generals knew to look elsewhere for fools on this. The last time, the Western head had already believed such nonsense. As a result, he couldn't even get out of bed for 6 months, but miraculously, he was alive. Yan Wang only wanted to continue killing himself with his power. He liked it when the others groveled before him and kneeled before this bloody old man. How hypocritical. Yan Wang was someone who never dared to enter the heavenly palace. However, he liked to display his strength in his own home. The only one who was a coward was him, and here it seems the victim is back, without even realizing it. Yan Wang tried to find something to hold on to. Maybe there would be something to punish his son for. The young master did as told. The Demon King was already in the dungeon. But what an oversight. Didn't father tell his son to bring him the demon's head? Although my father said I should go to the dungeon, he even gave me a special talisman to enter the dungeon. Did the young master mean to say that his lord was mistaken? He tried to explain at least something, but it was all useless. This was the fate of Yan Wang's son, to be his plaything to raise his father's vanity. You don't need a reason to beat up your son, just a desire, and the reason will find itself. In fear, the younger Yan Wang, of course, didn't even resist being beaten by his father. He was used to already being a whipping toy since he was a child. His father still hadn't played around. It seemed as if the young master was unconscious. But Yan Wang didn't care much about it. After all, if anyone else dares to disobey him, they will end up like his son. In this way, Yan Wang taught others lessons, and seemed stronger and more authoritative in the eyes of his subordinates, and they had no choice but to bow and agree with his words, even if they knew the truth. The old geezer was at it again. He not only wanted to establish himself in the eyes of his subordinates, but also to show that he was always right, even if he himself had made a mistake. No one wanted to fall into his trap, so he decided to make his own son the scapegoat. Besides, this wasn't the first time this had happened. Yan Wang was still trying to extract a confession from his son about what he had ordered him to do to the demon, but the young master did not agree with his father's theory in the slightest, for he clearly remembered that Yan Wang had ordered him to get the demon in front of him in the dungeon. Yan Wang certainly didn't expect this from his son. He was sure that he would immediately break down under his oppression and agree with him, but that was not the case. The subordinates began to fear for the life of the young master. It would be better if he did not show his courage now, because he was putting himself to death. Yan Wang wasn't going to stop there and continue to beat the guts out of his son, only for him to finally agree with him. But their family quarrels were interrupted by a huge stream of light energy that appeared from Yan Wang's back. Hao Xian was already calling out to that nasty old man. He couldn't continue to watch the younger ones being beaten recklessly like this. Although originally, Hao Xian wanted to at least wait for the entire crowd to disperse. But this old man was so annoying that it was simply impossible to stay away. The master's disciples were already excited for the fight to come. Sun Wukong was especially excited to compete with someone in terms of strength. The guys seemed to have purposely incurred Yan Wang's wrath. By entering the territory of the afterlife, they had signed their own death sentence. Sun Wukong was indeed intrigued and greedy for battle, but first of all, he asked for permission from his teacher to enter the battle. But this time, the master decided to deal with the Lord of the Underworld himself. Fortunately, he prepared the card of the Great Sage in advance. Activation will not take time. However, Sun Wukong would only be happy to observe the master. He didn't want to miss the opportunity to learn something else new from him. The time to activate a card had already been reduced to 1 minute. Hao Xian was confident that very soon he would be able to activate cards instantly. The transformation began the minute that card was pulled. Now, everyone could now observe the strongest of all the lords of the afterlife, Qin Guavan, at the final stage of his strength. As soon as this happened, one could already feel that the inner key had changed as well. Hao Xian didn't know what Yan Wang's ability was, but to be on the safe side, he decided to play it a little differently this time. He wanted to test the old man's strength, which he didn't even hide. Hao Xian promised that he wouldn't lay a finger on him, so Yan Wang could show him everything he had. And if Hao Xian made even a move, he would immediately admit defeat. In principle, the Lord agreed, though in his own way, saying, "Self-confident brat, let's see how you'll talk after my blow." Therefore, it was possible to begin. As Hao Xian had promised, he didn't even move, but the other demons did it instead. With this, he would have time to analyze Yan Wang's strength and create a future plan to fight him. Of course, one demon was easily dealt with by the Overlord, but was that all of Hao Xian's strength? If so, he's a complete non-entity by the Lord's standards. This is really just the beginning. The cherry on the cake is still to come. The demon had no trouble regenerating and recreating itself as if nothing had happened. So far, Yan Wang didn't feel any difficulty in this battle, so he tried to rush to dispel it quickly. It seemed completely useless on his part, because there was no way this demon would stop him. Consequently, Hao Xian was finished. But stopping it wasn't the main goal either. Although Yan Wang already considered his opponent defeated. This kind of speculation only made Hao Xian excited. It would seem that this person used to be an ordinary sloth, but now he had gotten a taste of this whole game, and was even enjoying it. Yan Wang was visibly dissatisfied. Arrogant people didn't like their own kind. And just like that, he found Hao Xian to be an ordinary brat who was proud of his worthless strength, and who also acted as if he had descended from the heavens. Today, the Lord planned to teach Hao Xian how to treat older and stronger masters. Naturally, the price for this lesson would be his life. Yan Wang's intentions were certainly cute, but he still hadn't even touched Hao Xian. The puppet monsters were beginning to recover once again. This demon regenerated very quickly, which seemed even impossible for Yan Wang. This kind of ability is a first-class ability that only the best of the best possess. And this power was wielded by some pathetic summoned demon, something Yan Wang was ashamed of. And not just one, but two. One demon had not only risen from the dead, but had even managed to split into two. The Lord of the Afterlife had never heard of such a talent for summoning. Of course, now that he was caught off guard, he didn't realize what kind of enemy was in front of him. But you shouldn't have made such a face. The fight had just begun. Hao Xian was excited, and waiting for the Overlord to show him what he could do.